How is it possible that a record described by its own creators as rubbish, a load of old rope, and scraping the barrel, stands today not merely as a relic of psychedelic excess, but as the Rosetta Stone that unlocks the entire golden era of Pink Floyd? To understand Atom Heart Mother, you must first discard the notion that musicians are the best judges of their own work. They are often too close to the technical struggle, the tape splicing, and the studio friction to hear the magic in the final pressing. We are looking at 1970. This is the bridge. Without this album, there is no Dark Side of the Moon, no Echoes, and certainly no Wish You Were Here. The band was in a state of creative desperation, trying to shed the erratic ghost of Syd Barrett and find a new sonic architecture. What they produced was a monster, a sprawling, symphonic, pastoral, and at times terrifying piece of music that challenged the very definition of rock. It is a work that demands your attention, not because it is perfect, but because it is audaciously human in its imperfections. Let us strip away the mythology and look at the instrumentation and the composition with the ear of a realist. The title track, taking up the entire first side of the vinyl, is a suite in the classical sense, yet it was constructed with a methodology that would make a conservatory professor weep. It is a collage, a Frankenstein's monster stitched together by the eccentric genius of Ron Geeson. You have to understand the sheer audacity of walking into Abbey Road Studios, grabbing a cello, a brass section, the John Aldous Choir, and a rock band that admitted they had run out of ideas, and attempting to fuse them into a 23-minute coherence. The track opens with Father's Shout, and immediately we are assaulted by a density of texture that was alien to rock music at the time. We are not talking about the polite orchestration of the moody blues or the structured classical adaptations of ELP. This is dissonance. This is distinctively heavy, low-end brass, tubas and trombones grinding against the silence. It mimics the mechanical noise of an industrial world before Gilmour's guitar cuts through with a tone that is pure, unadulterated Stratocaster fire. As an instrumentalist, you listen to this and realize the technical nightmare occurring behind the glass. The band laid down the rhythm track, drums and bass first. Crucially, they did this without a click track. The tempo breathes, it speeds up and slows down organically. Imagine the horror for the classically trained EMI session musicians trying to overdub brass onto a fluctuating rock rhythm. They hated it. They couldn't feel the swing or the unintended rubato. Geeson, an avant-garde disruptor, clashed with their rigid formalism to the point where choirmaster John Aldous had to step in to conduct just to keep the session from imploding. You can hear that tension. It doesn't sound smooth. It sounds like a battle for dominance between the orchestra and the band. That friction is what makes it rock and roll. Then we transition into Breast Milky. Listen to the cello line. It is lyrical, weeping, and distinctly English. It evokes the grey skies of Cambridge, a pastoral melancholy that became Wright and Gilmour's signature. The organ work here is Richard Wright at his most subtle. He isn't playing lead. He is painting the background canvas with a Hammond B3, providing a warm, vibrating bed for the cello and guitar to converse. The interaction here is a masterclass in dynamics. Most modern bands have no concept of dynamics. They play at one volume, loud. Here the band drops to a whisper, forcing the listener to lean in before the drums kick in with a slow, plodding groove that feels heavy, like walking through mud. The Mother 4 section introduces the choir, and this is where the album alienates the casual listener and rewards the serious one. This is not a gospel choir. It is closer to the avant-garde choral works of György Ligeti. They are using their voices as percussive and melodic instruments, chanting nonsense syllables, sliding through chromatic scales that create an atmosphere of unease. It is haunting. It suggests something ancient and perhaps druidic. When the band rejoins the choir, the mix becomes dense, almost muddy. A modern producer would clean this up, separate the frequencies, and ruin it. The mud is the glue. The wall of sound hits you as a singular physical force. And then the piece pivots into funky dung. This is the section that requires you to check your prejudice at the door. A choir and a brass section over a mid-tempo blues jam? On paper, it is absurd. In practice, it is hypnotic. Gilmour's soloing here is some of his finest pre-Dark Side phrasing. He isn't playing fast, he is playing right. Every bend is microtonally perfect. He lets the notes breathe. Mason's drumming is often criticized for being too simple, but complex drumming here would have cluttered the frequency spectrum. Mason locks in, providing a heartbeat that allows the brass ostinatos to circle around the guitar. The reintroduction of the main theme in the Remergence section is a triumph of sonata form applied to rock. It brings the chaos back to order, resolving the tension with a grandeur that is undeniable. Critics often call the suite pompous. Of course, it is pompous. It is progressive rock. If you want humility, listen to folk music. If you want to explore the limits of what a recording studio can do, you listen to Adam Hart Mother. The band hated it because the recording process was a nightmare of tape splicing, physically cutting magnetic tape with razor blades to join sections because they couldn't play the whole thing through in one take. Flipping the record to side B, we leave the symphonic grandeur and enter the realm of the songwriter. This side is often overlooked, yet it contains the blueprints for the band's future solo careers. We start with Roger Waters' If. If you want to understand The Wall, you start here. It is stripped back, just an acoustic guitar, a very dry present bass line and a voice. It is the genesis of Waters' obsession with isolation, insanity, and the self. If I were a good man, I'd understand the spaces between friends. The terminology here is musical intimacy. The guitar is close-mic'd. You can hear the fingers sliding on the strings. It is a stark contrast to the bombast of side 1, serving as a palate cleanser. Then comes Summer 68 by Rick Wright. This is the hidden gem of the Pink Floyd catalog. It is a harsh critique of the rock and roll lifestyle, the hollow encounters with groupies, wrapped in a melody that sounds like the Beach Boys on a bad acid trip. The piano work is jaunty, almost music hall, but look at the bridge section. The brass returns, blowing an aggressive fanfare that shatters the pop song structure. It is jarring and brilliant. Wright's harmonic knowledge shines here. The chord progressions are sophisticated, moving through modulations that are unexpected for a rock song. It is a tragedy that Wright's songwriting took a back seat in later years, as he possessed a melodic sensibility that balanced Waters' acerbic nature. David Gilmour's Fat Old Son follows. This is the track Gilmour still plays live, and for good reason. It is the ultimate evocation of the English twilight. But here is what the casual listener misses. This is effectively a Gilmour solo track. He plays the guitars, the vocals, and, crucially, the drums and bass. The groove is loose, less mechanical than Mason's style. The pedal steel-like sounds are actually slide work on his guitar, providing that sliding, ethereal texture. But the climax of the song is the guitar solo. As the song fades out, Gilmour delivers a masterclass in pentatonic phrasing. The tone is thick, likely a fuzz-face pedal pushing the amp to the breaking point. It is the sound of the sun going down, warm and blinding. It is technically simple, but emotionally devastating. This is what separates a technician from a musician, the ability to make 3 notes sound like the end of the world. Finally, we arrive at Alan's Psychedelic Breakfast. This is the track that tests your patience. It is musique concrète, the use of recorded sounds as raw musical material. The sound of Rhody Allen Styles cooking, a dripping tap, bacon frying. It is ridiculous, yes, but it is also a textural experiment. The musical interludes between the sound effects are lovely pastoral folk baroque pieces. Is it a masterpiece? No. But it shows a band willing to fail. They were willing to put the sound of a man eating breakfast on a rock album just to see what would happen. That spirit of experimentation is dead in modern commercial music, where every second is optimized for retention and streaming numbers. The cover art deserves a mention in this analysis because it is inseparable from the music. A cow. Lulu Bell III. No band name, no title on the front. Storm Thorgerson created the ultimate anti-cover. In an era of psychedelic swirls and intricate fantasy art, Pink Floyd put a cow on the cover. It was a statement. The music is the content. The image is nothing. It was a rejection of the space rock label that the press was trying to force upon them. It forced the consumer to pick it up and ask, "What is this?" It was a marketing hook based on mystery and banality. Why did the band hate it? Because it was hard work and they felt they lost control to Geeson and the session musicians. They felt the timing was sloppy due to the lack of a click track, but history has been kinder than the creators. Atom Heart Mother reached #1 in the UK charts. It proved that a band could be successful without a hit single, without a charismatic frontman, and without following the verse-chorus-verse structure. From a technical standpoint, this album is a study in the limitations of 1970 recording technology. They were working primarily with 8-track machines. To get a choir, a brass section, and a band onto 8 tracks required bouncing down, mixing several tracks onto one to free up space for more overdubs. Every time you bounce, you add tape hiss and lose generation quality. The murky sound of the album is a result of this technical battle, but that murk adds a sense of distance, a foggy atmosphere that fits the music perfectly. A pristine digital remix often robs this album of its character. The grain is part of the photograph. To the aspiring musician or the demanding listener, Atom Heart Mother teaches a vital lesson. Composition is about architecture. It is about building a structure that can support the weight of your ideas. The suite is built on motifs, small melodic ideas that recur in different forms. The brass plays a theme, later the guitar plays it, then the choir sings it. This is how you create a 23-minute song that doesn't feel like 5 separate songs glued together, even though physically, that's exactly what it was. It creates a subconscious continuity for the listener. Furthermore, the album represents a distinct move away from the American blues influence that dominated British rock in the 60s. While Funky Dung has a bluesy groove, the harmonic language of the album is European. It draws from church music, classical romanticism, and English folk. It is the sound of Pink Floyd finding their geographical identity. They stopped trying to be an R&B band from the Delta and accepted that they were middle-class art school students from Cambridge. That acceptance of self is what makes the music authentic. We must also address the criticism regarding the pretentiousness of the work. There is a tendency in modern discourse to democratization, to level the playing field, and say that simple music is just as valid as complex music. While true in a sociological sense, from a musical standpoint, complexity offers a different nutritional value. Atom Heart Mother requires active listening. You cannot vacuum the house while this is playing. You cannot scroll through your phone. The dynamic range, the difference between the quietest and loudest parts, is immense. If you set the volume for the quiet organ parts, the brass entry will blow your speakers. This demands that you sit down, shut up, and listen. It is a demand that few modern albums make. The weirdness of the middle section, Mind Your Throats, where the voices are distorted and the tape is sped up and slowed down, is a direct lineage to the work of Stockhausen and the electronic avant-garde. Pink Floyd was popularizing the avant-garde, smuggling it into the bedrooms of teenagers under the guise of rock music. That is a subversive act. They were expanding the palette of what the average listener found acceptable. Without the noise experiments of Atom Heart Mother, you do not get the industrial textures of 9 Inch Nails or the soundscapes of Radiohead decades later. So, when you approach this album, do not look for the polished perfection of Dark Side of the Moon. Do not look for the radio-friendly hooks of Money or Another Brick in the Wall. Look for the struggle. Listen to the sound of a band stretching beyond their technical capabilities and succeeding through sheer force of will. Listen to the tension between the rock rhythm section and the classical brass. That tension is the sweet spot. Gilmour might call it garbage because he remembers the headache of making it. Waters might dismiss it because the lyrics weren't yet his primary focus. But as a listener, you have the luxury of the final product. You have the Atom Heart Mother Suite, as a monumental slab of symphonic rock that stands as a cathedral of sound. It is daring, flawed, beautiful, and absolutely essential. It is the sound of Pink Floyd learning how to be Pink Floyd. If you claim to appreciate rock history, you cannot skip this chapter. You cannot understand the destination if you ignore the journey. This album is the muddy, difficult, glorious path they walked to reach the summit. Put it on the turntable. Turn the volume knob until the neighbors complain. Let the brass section pin you to the wall. And when the choir starts chanting, realize that you are listening to one of the bravest experiments in the history of popular music. It is not pretty, it is magnificent.